All right, so if you remember, we were creating a scene, looks like this. If you run it, each of these planets, except for the moon, because the moon apparently doesn't move, is going to be revolving around the sun, which has a point of 0, 400. So 0 on the x-axis, which is left to right. So 0, and then 400, which is going to be halfway up, because remember, this whole thing was 800 pixels. And so 400 is right in the middle. So that's a center point where all of them are rotating. They're each rotating at different speeds and velocities and angles, but it will basically do that. And what we're going to be looking for is counting. We're going to try to count how long it takes and different counters for different of these objects. So what we're going to be working on is adding buttons. And so we're going to add a button, which you've already done in the previous project. We're going to be adding a button, adjusting some of the properties like naming it, because if we have more than one button, you need to know which is which. And then from there, we're going to center it by adding it and making it to this X value and this Y value. So 368.10, quick question, test for yourself. Is that going to be on the top? Is that going to be the bottom, left, or the right? So I want you to think about that. So if you remember correctly, it's 800 by 800, but 0, 0, where's our origin? It's different than it was in math. So make a prediction if you think this point's going to be in the top, bottom, left, the right, and where it's going to be. So keep that in mind. All right, so let's add a button. And once again, this is the one that says reset. So back here, let's make sure we have our inner planets as opposed to the gas, because notice how there's nothing there. We're going to have our inner planets set. We're going to be inserting a new object, and we need to find button. And if you don't remember where button was, you can search for it. You can also look on the side and say, okay, is it going to be background? These are all different pieces. And completely honest with you, I don't remember which one it was. So I'm going to search for button and check it out. Button, there it is. So we're looking for a new button. I'm going to press OK. And then I have to just click somewhere on here. It doesn't really matter where. And there's my button. Right now it says empty. And so what I can do is double click on it and enter new button text. And remember what it was called? Reset. So press reset and OK. So now you could physically move it around wherever you want. However, if you remember, it's a lot easier to adjust them down here in the properties. So once you go to properties, I'm going to go to the size and position. And remember, it gave us some X and Y values. So I'm going to go back to my book, and it said to put it at 368.10. So 368.10. So X value is 368. Y value is 10. And check it out. Where is it? Top center. Remember, this whole thing is 800 across. And so 368 is right about half. So it's going to be right in the middle. And then 10, remember, 0, 0 is up here. So 10 is just kind of towards the top. All right, so there's that. Remember, we do need to rename it, not just button, but button underscore reset. So that way we know which button it is, because there will be multiple buttons. So there's our button. Next, what do we do? Next, we're going to be adding another counter object. It looks like we're going to be, excuse me, we're going to be creating a new object again. And then we're going to be looking at all objects. And there's alphabetical order. We're going to be looking for something called a counter. So once again, you can search, but let's go there. So once again, inner planet, we're here. Insert, new object, counter. We want a counter. Press OK, I'm assuming, but it didn't tell us to yet. So let's go back and find out. So counter, it says click anywhere on the frame. So yes, OK, and let's put a counter. It says, note, since the default color is black and the background image is dark, it will be helpful to place it on a gray area outside the frame so that you can find it. And we'll move it to the final position. So let's go ahead and place it. And after that, let's rename the object as days counter and make it a 40 by 60. So 40 width, 60 height. Okay, so counter, let's put it out here somewhere for now. And days counter is what we were going to be calling it, days counter. And then let's reposition it and then change the width. Remember, this right here adjusts the size and position. So the width, I believe, was 40 by 60. Double check. So 40 by 60. Yes, and it was days counter. Next, we're going to be editing the sprite. Remember, sprite is a two-dimensional object. And specifically when we're dealing with games, there's something called contrast. And contrast is the difference between how black and dark something is and how light and white something is. You will need to know this word. I'm going to ask you about it. So remember, the contrast is the difference in a color. So just looking at this background right here, notice how the text is really dark and the background's really white and light. That's a high contrast. My image down here, you'll notice that although I have a white background, it's not as different as my text up here. So I'm here and my white background's there, but it's not as different of a color as the text here. So let's go ahead and we're going to double click on the days counter and then click on the tolerance text box and then enter 3. So let's go see what that means. So here this is, double click on it. Tolerance. I don't see tolerance. Does anybody see tolerance? It's probably one of these buttons here. So let me go back and see if they gave us a better clue about what that looked like. So double click on the days counter object, which we did, figure 5.3, and then click on the tolerance text box and enter 3. So tolerance is an acceptable variance, increasing value. So let's look for tolerance. Color picker, brush tool, line tool. I don't know where tolerance is. If you see it, you should jump out and show it to me. I don't see which one tolerance is. Transparency looks closer. Well, I'm going to pause it and find it so you're not just waiting for me to find it. So give me just a moment. Pause this video. So I found the tolerance. It didn't show me here. So check this out. Right now, I currently have the brush tool on, which allows me to kind of brush and paint new things, which is kind of cool. It's worth playing with. I was playing with it earlier, which is why it's there. But the fill tool is what has tolerance. So I'm going to click on fill tool. Tolerance is 0. I'm going to move it up to 3. Oh, it moves quickly, so I'll just type in 3. There you go. Tolerance 3. And then we're going to select a reddish color. You can select any color you want, but red is going to be kind of what they're looking for here. So I'm going to choose that color red. Why? I like it. So I'm going to start painting all my colors that exact same color with a tolerance of 3. And tolerance has to do with how contrasted the colors are and how deep they're going to be when it's actually on your screen. So I'm going to go through and paint all of my numbers, which you need to do as well. So I got zeros number 1 through 9. Oh, might as well do these as well, even though these won't actually pop up in my counter box, but that's okay. We'll leave it there. Those are only if your numbers get way too large for it to count. So there's that, and I believe the next piece there is going to press OK. So I'm going to press OK. If not, I can always go back. All right, so there's our game so far. We've increased the tolerance, and then we've set the red color. We pressed OK. Now we need to use the properties to put the day counter at the coordinate point 800, which is your X, which picture where that is. So 0, 0 is top left. And then 800 is your X variable. So it's going to be all the way on the right. And then 70. How far down is that? Remember, not very, because all the way down would be 800. So let's put it at 870. So back here, make sure it's selected. If it's not, like for instance, I can click on Earth and then back on the counter. Now, size and position, I don't remember what it said. What was it? 870. So let's put that. So X position right now is 800, and the Y position is 70. So there's our counter. Check it out, top right. So now we got a reset button, and we got a days counter. Now they're not going to do anything right now because we haven't programmed them yet. But let's go next. So next it says cloning an object. Recall, a clone is a copy of the original as a brand new object that does not inherit the properties of the original. So that means that even though this one is red, the clone may or may not. So let's go ahead and go through, and we're going to be cloning the days counter object. So it's going to show us what that looks like, and I think I may have missed the steps. So right click on the days counter object, and then click clone object. And then let's go do that right now. So right click to click off of it. So notice how I clicked off, and then I didn't mean to do that. I'm going to right click on the object, days counter, and then I see clone object. So I click on that. And then there's some options of how many I want to choose. I'm pretty sure I'm only doing 1, but let me double check. So applying what you learned, create 2 rows and 1 column with spacing of 5 between the rows. So that's a little bit more in depth than I thought. So 2 rows, 1 column with a spacing of 5. So 2 rows, 1 column, row spacing of 5. Check it out. I have 2 different counters now. That's exactly what I wanted. So applying what you learned, we did that. Now applying what you've learned again, rename the cloned object as stopwatch. And then we need to create a clone also of the reset button so that it's 5 pixels below the original, and name it button time. So we're creating a whole bunch of random stuff here. Let me first rename this new object. So by clicking on it, I can change the properties down here. It's not a days counter. I believe it's a stopwatch. So now it's a stopwatch. And then the reset button, I'm going to right click on that as well and clone. And 2 rows, columns 1, spacing of 5 as well. Press OK. Now I have 2 buttons, and the reset, it's not going to stay reset. Let's see what it says. So we're going to be calling it button as time. So, and it's going to say stop time. So it will say stop time on the button, but we're going to call the button time. Let's come back here. So here's our new button. Let me double click on it. Stop time. And down here, let's rename it as button underscore time. That way we can distinguish it between button and reset. So now we have reset, stop time, our days counter, oops, I just moved it, and our stopwatch. Pretty good. So that's the end of this video, and I will show you how to program those on the next.